She sent it at 2:47 in the afternoon on a Thursday in March. I was on a break at the station, sitting in the bay with a cup of coffee and my phone, and the text came through with a photo attached. The message said, "Finally hung them, what do you think?" The curtains were beige. Linen, I think. She'd been talking about replacing the living room curtains for 2 months, and I told her whatever she thought looked good was fine with me. So I opened the photo to give her a thumbs up and move on with my day. I almost did exactly that. I had the photo on screen for maybe 4 seconds before something made me stop. Not a sound, not a thought, just that thing in the back of your brain that says wait. I brought the phone closer. I looked at the window behind the curtains, the one that faced the side yard. There was a reflection in the glass. Not a clear one. Distorted the way reflections in old window glass always are. But the shape was unmistakable, a man, standing maybe 6 feet back from the window, facing toward wherever my wife was standing with her phone. Tall. Dark shirt. And not me. I was 40 miles away at Fire Station 12 in Naperville, Illinois, in the middle of a 24-hour shift. I put my coffee down. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I took a screenshot, texted back "looks great," and went back inside. That was March 14th. By June 3rd she had been served with divorce papers. A man named Paul Decker had a restraining order filed against him by his own employer, and I had walked out of a mediation session with everything that mattered. But let me start from the beginning. I'm 49 years old. I've been a firefighter for 23 years, the last 14 with the Naperville Fire Department out of Station 12. Before that I did 4 years with a smaller department in Rockford where I grew up. It's shift work, 24 on, 48 off, which means I'm home a lot, and then I'm gone a full day, and that rhythm becomes the structure of your whole life after a while. Her name was Cheryl. We met in 2005 at a department barbecue. She was there with a friend who was dating one of my colleagues. She was 31, working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-size company in the western suburbs, and she had this way of listening when you talked that made you feel like what you were saying actually mattered. We dated for 2 years and got married in 2007. Our daughter Emma came in 2009. Our son Jake came in 2011. For most of those years, we were good. Not perfect, the shift schedule created friction, the way it always does in firefighter marriages, those long 24-hour absences that become invisible fault lines in a relationship. But we managed it. We had a system. She was independent, capable, didn't need me to be home every night to feel like the marriage was working. Or so I thought. We bought the house in Lisle in 2011, a 3-bedroom colonial on a quiet street, big elm tree in the front yard, the kind of neighborhood where people wave from their driveways. Emma and Jake grew up there. I coached Jake's little league from when he was 7 until he aged out at 12. That house meant something. The first signs I explained away. Cheryl had always been social. She had a core group of girlfriends she'd known since college, and they did things together regularly: dinners, weekend trips, a standing Wednesday lunch. None of that was unusual. What became unusual, gradually, was the frequency. More evenings out. More weekends where I was home with the kids and she was somewhere else. I didn't think infidelity. I thought she was just living her life. She also started being more particular about her phone. Not dramatically, just a new habit of taking it with her when she left rooms, keeping its screen down on the counter. I noticed it the way you notice a small change in a room. You know something is different, but you can't immediately say what. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself that for about 4 months. Jake was the one who said something first, and he didn't know he was saying anything. He was 13 at the time, early February, and we were driving back from his orthodontist appointment. He was in the passenger seat messing with the radio and he said, completely casual, Who's the guy mom's always talking to on the porch? I kept my eyes on the road. What guy? I don't know his name. She goes out on the back porch to talk to him. Like, on the phone. She always kind of closes the door. How often? I said. He shrugged. I don't know. A lot? When you're at work. I nodded. I changed the subject. We talked about his orthodontist visit and whether he wanted to stop for food, and I drove us home, and that evening after the kids were in bed I sat at the kitchen table and I thought about what my 13-year-old had just accidentally told me. I want to be clear about something, I'm not a paranoid man. 23 years in this job, you learn to assess a situation before you react. You don't run into a burning building because your gut says go, you read the smoke, you read the structure, you make a decision based on information. I applied the same discipline here. I wasn't going to blow up my marriage on a hunch and a 13-year-old's offhand comment. I needed information. The Ring camera I already had. I'd installed a Ring Video Doorbell Pro on the front door 2 years earlier after a package theft in the neighborhood. It had motion-activated recording and I could pull up footage from my phone. I'd never used it for anything except checking whether a delivery had arrived. I checked the footage going back 30 days. What I found, a silver BMW 5 Series, mid-2010s, appearing in front of my house on 6 separate occasions. Always during my shifts, always between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. on days when I was at the station. Parked at the curb. Sometimes for 2 hours. Once for 4 hours and 11 minutes. I could see the plates clearly. I ran the plates through a buddy of mine who works traffic enforcement for Naperville PD. He's not supposed to do this and I'm not going to elaborate. The car was registered to a Paul Decker, 44 years old, address in Wheaton. I looked up Paul Decker. He wasn't hard to find. LinkedIn profile, professional headshot, senior account executive at a software company in Downers Grove. Dark shirt in his profile photo. Towel. I sat with that for 3 days. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a private investigator named Carol Briggs who worked out of a small office in Aurora. She'd been recommended on a forum I'd found, one of those places where people in exactly my situation share information. I met her at a Panera on a Tuesday afternoon, brought the Ring footage screenshots, the plate information, the LinkedIn profile. She was 60-ish, sharp, no nonsense. She quoted me $900 for a week of surveillance. I wrote the check. The second call was to a divorce attorney named Michael Stern in Naperville. I wasn't ready to file. I wanted to understand my position before anything else happened. Carol Briggs was thorough in the way that only people who've done something for 30 years can be thorough. She didn't just photograph. She documented. In the first week she established the pattern. Paul Decker came to my house on my shift days. Always arrived between 10 and 11 a.m. Always left between 2 and 4 p.m. He parked 2 houses down on the second visit. I think Cheryl had told him not to park directly out front, but Carol had anticipated this and positioned herself accordingly. She got photographs of him entering the house. Cheryl opening the front door, the 2 of them going inside. His car parked down the street. The house quiet for hours. Him leaving. Cheryl standing in the doorway watching him go. She also, on the 4th day, got something I hadn't anticipated. Paul Decker, she discovered through public records, was married. His wife's name was Diane. They had 3 kids, 10, 12, and 15. They lived in a 4-bedroom house in Wheaton that they'd bought together in 2014. Carol also found that Paul Decker had, 8 months earlier, filed an expense report at his company for a hotel stay in downtown Chicago. The hotel was the Kimpton Allegro. 2 nights. The dates corresponded exactly with the weekend Cheryl had told me she was at a college roommate's bachelorette weekend in the city. I had stayed home with Emma and Jake. I had ordered pizza and watched a movie with my kids while my wife was at the Kimpton Allegro with Paul Decker. Carol handed me her report on a Friday morning. 44 pages. I read it in my truck in the parking lot of a Target on Route 53 because I didn't want to read it at the station and I didn't want to read it at home. Then I went back to the photo. I had a buddy from the department, Gary, 20 years on the job, also happens to have a side interest in photography, who I trusted completely. I showed him the curtain photo without context, just asked him to look at the window reflection and tell me what he saw. He took the phone, zoomed in, studied it for about 30 seconds. "That's a person," he said. "Yeah," I said. "Tall guy. Dark top." "Yeah." He handed my phone back. He looked at me. He didn't ask any questions because Gary is the kind of man who understands when questions aren't needed. I had the photo. I had Carol's report. I had the ring footage. I had the plate information. I had the hotel dates matching the bachelorette weekend story. I called Michael Stern and told him I was ready to move forward. Michael Stern advised me to do one more thing before we filed: document the asset situation completely. Bank accounts, retirement accounts, the house equity, her income. He wanted a full financial picture before Cheryl had any reason to start moving money. I spent 2 weeks pulling everything together: our joint accounts, my pension, everything in both our names. What I found while doing that, with Michael's paralegal helping me pull statements: a savings account I hadn't known about. Cheryl had opened it 14 months earlier at a different bank, not the one we used jointly. She'd been transferring $400 to $800 a month into it. The balance was $9,200. I don't know what she was planning with it. Maybe nothing specific. Maybe she was building herself an exit. Either way, it existed, and Michael flagged it for the proceedings. The confrontation happened on a Saturday morning in late May. Not because I'd planned it for that day specifically, I'd been waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances, the kids out of the house. Emma had a softball tournament 2 towns over. Jake was at a friend's. I was home. Cheryl was home. She was in the kitchen making coffee when I came downstairs. Normal Saturday morning. She was in her robe, hair up, scrolling her phone. The silver BMW was not outside. Paul Decker only came during my shifts. Apparently he wasn't bold enough for weekends. I sat down at the kitchen table. I had my phone and a manila folder. "I need to show you something," I said. She looked up from her phone. "What?" I slid my phone across the table. On screen was the curtain photo, zoomed into the window reflection. "Look at the window," I said. She looked at it. I watched her face. Something moved through it, a quick, involuntary thing, there and gone in under a second. Then she set the phone down carefully. "I don't know what I'm looking at," she said. "Sure you do," I said. "That's Paul Decker. He's 6 feet tall, he drives a silver 2016 BMW 530i, he parks it 2 houses down when he comes over during my shifts, and I have ring camera footage of him entering this house on 6 separate occasions between January and March." Silence. I opened the manila folder. Put Carol's surveillance photos on the table between us. Paul arriving. Cheryl at the door. Paul leaving. Cheryl watching him go. "I also have a private investigator's full report," I said. 44 pages. Including the dates of the Kimpton Allegro, which match exactly with the bachelorette weekend you described to me in detail. You mentioned the restaurant you all went to. You texted me photos from the hotel bar. She put both hands around her coffee mug. She didn't pick it up. She just held it. And I found the savings account, I said. The one at Midwest Community Bank. $9,200. She closed her eyes. I'm not here to have a fight, I said. Michael Stern has already prepared the filing. You'll be served Monday. I wanted you to hear it from me first, in this house, before it became official. She opened her eyes. They were wet, but she wasn't crying, not yet. The kids, she said. The kids are my first priority, I said. They have always been my first priority. I'd like us to keep it that way through this process. She nodded. Once. Is there anything you want to say? I said. She looked at the photos on the table. She looked at the curtain photos still on my phone screen. And she said, I didn't think you'd notice. I almost didn't, I said. I picked up the folder and my phone and I went upstairs. I got dressed. I drove to the station, even though I wasn't on shift, because I needed somewhere familiar to sit for a while. Gary was there. He took one look at my face, handed me a cup of coffee, and sat with me in the bay without saying a word for about 40 minutes. That's the kind of friend you need in a situation like this. The following Monday, Cheryl was served. That same day, Carol Briggs, who I'd asked to look into Paul Decker's situation, contacted his wife Diane directly. Carol had asked me first if that was something I wanted to do. I said yes. Diane deserved to know. Diane Decker, I'm told, called her own attorney that same afternoon. Paul Decker worked as a senior account executive at a software company called Viridian Systems in Downers Grove. He managed corporate client accounts, the kind of role where you're regularly taking clients to dinners, entertainment events, that sort of thing, and expensing it back to the company. What Carol had found, and what she'd passed to me without me asking her to dig this deep, was that several of the hotel expenses Paul had filed with Viridian, including the Kimpton Allegro stay, had been submitted as client entertainment. 2 nights at a downtown Chicago hotel, meals, minibar, room service. Filed as business development. Reimbursed by his employer. He'd expensed my wife as a client dinner. Carol had printed the expense report details she'd obtained, I'm not going to explain how, and included them in a supplemental file she handed me at our final meeting. She said, I thought you might want to know the full picture, and left it at that. I brought that supplemental file to Michael Stern. He looked at it for a long moment and said, this isn't relevant to your divorce proceedings. But it's very relevant to his employer. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I sent an anonymous email to the HR department at Viridian Systems with Carol's supplemental file attached. I don't know exactly what happened after that. What I know is that Paul Decker's LinkedIn profile was updated 6 weeks later to show him as open to work. And Carol, who had her own sources, told me he'd been terminated for a policy violation related to expense reporting. He had submitted $4,800 in fraudulent business expenses over 14 months. His employer's investigation apparently found more than just the hotel. Diane Decker filed for divorce in June. Her attorney and Michael Stern ended up on a call at some point, our situations intersecting in the legal world the way these things sometimes do. I never spoke to Diane directly. I hope she's okay. Cheryl moved out in July, into an apartment in Wheaton, yes, same town as Paul Decker, which told me something about where her head was. Whether they continued seeing each other after everything fell apart, I genuinely don't know and stopped caring about fairly quickly. She kept her job, the marketing coordinator role had become marketing director by that point, she'd done well professionally, and none of this touched her employment. That was fine. I didn't want her to lose her job. I wanted her out of my house and a fair legal outcome. The house she got none of. It was in both our names, but between the hidden savings account, which Michael characterized as financial concealment, and the overall circumstances, the settlement gave me the house and primary custody of Emma and Jake. She got alternating weekends and a Wednesday dinner. Emma was 15 when we separated. Jake was 13. Emma handled it with a kind of quiet self-possession that reminded me uncomfortably of her mother. She processed things internally, didn't show much, surfaced occasionally with a question that was more precise than you expected. Jake was angrier. He had a rough fall, grades slipped, he quit the baseball travel team he'd been on for 3 years, spent a lot of time in his room. We got him a therapist named Dr. Okafor who he initially hated and eventually liked well enough to keep going. The moment that cost me the most wasn't any of the legal proceedings or the financial negotiations. It was a Tuesday night in August, dinner just the three of us, first week of school. I'd made pasta, we were talking about their schedules, and Jake said, completely out of nowhere, "Dad, was it a long time?" I knew what he was asking. "Long enough," I said. He nodded and went back to his pasta. That was all he needed, apparently. Just an honest answer to an honest question. Cheryl lost the social world we'd built together. That happens in every divorce, but it happened faster and more completely here because the circumstances became known. Small communities talk, and Lyle is a small community. The couples we'd known, the school parents, the neighbors who'd watched our kids grow up, they didn't make dramatic choices. They just gradually realigned. She ended up isolated in a way I don't think she'd anticipated. I'm not cataloging that with any pleasure. I'm just describing what happened. The divorce was finalized in November, 8 months from the day I stood in that bay at the station staring at a curtain photo, to the day it was legally done. Michael Stern did good work. The settlement was clean, house to me, primary custody to me, equitable division of retirement accounts, no alimony given the roughly equal incomes. The $9,200 in the hidden account was factored into the asset division. I came out of it in a stable position, which was all I'd wanted. Emma is 17 now. She got her driver's license in the spring and immediately started using it to get away from me whenever possible, which her therapist assures me is completely normal and healthy. She's looking at colleges, journalism, she thinks. She wants to write. I read everything she writes when she shows me, which isn't often, but when she does it's good. She got that from somewhere that isn't me. Jake is 15. He went back to baseball this spring, not the travel team, a rec league, lower pressure, more fun. He hit 2 home runs in April and called me from the dugout, voice breaking with excitement the way it does when a teenage boy forgets for a moment to seem cool. I stood in my kitchen and laughed until I had to sit down. I'm still at Station 12. Still doing the 24 on, 48 off. The shift schedule that was supposed to be a fault line turned out to be, after everything, just a schedule. I come home from a shift and the house is mine. The elm tree in the front yard is still there. Duke, our yellow lab, he stayed with us, that wasn't even a discussion, sleeps at the foot of Jake's bed and has for 11 years. The curtains Cheryl hung are still in the living room. Beige linen. They look fine, actually. I keep meaning to replace them and I never do. Maybe I will when I get around to it. Maybe I'll keep them just as they are. Either way, they're mine now.